Meklit Hadero is an Ethiopian American vocalist, songwriter, and composer known for her electric stage presence, innovative sound, and vibrant cultural activism. Her latest EP, titled Ethio Blue, was released March 8, 2024, and spent nearly 2 months at number 12 on the NACC World Charts. Meklit's Ethio-Jazz performances have taken her to renowned stages across 4 continents. Her albums have topped world music charts across the US and Europe, received rave reviews, and been covered extensively by the press. Meklit has collaborated with renowned artists such as the Kronos Quartet, Andrew Bird, Preservation Hall Jazz Band, and the late creator of funk music, Pee Wee Ellis. Meklit has always straddled her creative practice with her passion for cultural activism. She is the former chief of program at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco, where she helped design and implement a slate of radical programs supporting social justice-focused artists during the height of the pandemic. She is a sought-after thought leader and speaker and has given talks on multiple TED stages at the UN and at the National Geographic Storyteller Summit, as well as at institutions, organizations, and universities around the globe. Meklit is a National Geographic Explorer, a TED Senior Fellow, and a former artist in residence at Harvard University. She is the co-founder of the Nile Project, a featured voice in the UN Women's theme song, and a winner of the 2021 Global Fest Artist Award. Meklit has been a guest DJ on KCRW's Morning Becomes Eclectic, created new works via commissions from the Lincoln Center, MAP Fund, Center for the Art of Performances at UCLA, Stanford Live, NYU Abu Dhabi, and many more. Her music has been featured by the New York Times, BBC, CNN, NPR, Washington Post, Vibe Magazine, San Francisco Chronicle, Boston Globe, and many more. Meklit is the co-founder, co-producer, and host of Movement, a podcast radio series, live performance series, and community building initiative uplifting the stories, songs, and cultural power of immigrant musicians. The show airs monthly on PRX's The World to an audience of 2.5 million listeners. Season 2 of Movement launches July 16th, 2024, wherever you get your podcasts. Enjoy the show.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of Q Points Podcast. I am DJ Sir Daniel.
And my name is Jay Ray, sometimes known by my government as Johnny Ray Cornegay III. What's happening, y'all?
Listen, Q Points Podcast is the podcast dropping the needle on Black music history. And Jay Ray, I am so proud that we are a podcast, a movement that is a staunch supporter of all Black stories.
Yes.
Coming from not only here in the United States, but of course, all the stories that are coming from the diaspora. And we have a special guest on this episode. Jay Ray, please introduce our guest.
Folks, we are incredibly excited to welcome Meklit Hadero to Q Points. Meklit, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. It's so good to be here with you. I love talking about all things diaspora. So here I am at home, you know.
You had to do it.
Absolutely. Yep. So we have several things we want to discuss with you. Of course, we want to get into your podcast, but here's what's interesting. Your podcast is a radio show. So it's like podcast, radio show, all the movement and all the things, right? But before we get into that, so I recently caught that you did a performance. This was back in August. It was at the Yerba Buena Gardens Festival.
Yes.
I wanted to be here so bad. So you did this performance. It was called Meklit's Movement Immigrant Orchestra. And from the description, it was 13 musicians, yes, representing 11 countries, including India, Mexico, Ethiopia, Cuba, Italy, Taiwan, Spain, Iran, Mali, Haiti, Palestine. Meklit, let's talk about you and your musicianship and a bit about what inspired you to convene all of these musicians.
Well, thank you for asking about that moment because I have to say that was like one of the highlights of my entire musical career. And I think, the underlying thing for me is that I like to tell bigger stories together with other artists than I can do by myself.
Mm,
And I think when you get people together, there's from across, boundaries, whether those boundaries are invisible lines on a map that are called countries or whether they are from different communities and cultures of all kinds. I think there's always a power in gathering folks. And there's an X factor in it. So that actually, the movement Immigrant Orchestra actually started out of this series of gatherings of immigrant musicians that we were having. I was
mhm.
like, our communities are under attack in a way that is just constant and oppressive, and we need to be together and understand and from a place that starts from our cultural power.
Yeah.
So we just started having gatherings and food, and what happens when you get musicians together is that they want to play. And so we would, but people also had this very deep understanding of the struggles. Like a lot of times immigrant communities can be siloed across
Hmm.
ethnicity or language, but we actually have a lot of the same struggles. We all, that's what solidarity means. Like
Yeah.
actually we are all the same forces that are oppressing, it's a
Mm.
cross, it's a cross.
Yes.
um so we just like we started gathering folks and realized we had so many stories that were echoes of each other, and then we would be sharing these very deep powerful stories with each other, and then people would be like, you get into an emotional space, but
Yes.
then you're like, okay, we're gonna put it in the music, and we would have these jams that would just last. And they were, I was like, yo, this, the first one, there's this a Malian Ngoni player called Mamadou Sidibe, and he grows the gourds in Chico, California.
That's
And
cool.
then in Oakland, he builds them, and they are these artworks. They are these, I mean, they're literally like sound artworks. Like they're
Yeah.
so beautiful. And he started playing with a cellist from Korea and
Mm.
a guitarist from Spain.
Wow.
And everybody was like, I, it, but like we literally like actually it's not a place for words, it's a place for sounds.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
just wanted to be together and play together, and that's how the Immigrant Orchestra started. but what I but then what I didn't totally realize was how cathartic it would be for the audience, because we
Mm.
came from this, like we built a love amongst each other, and and then we were able to bring that to the audience, and they wouldn't let us go for 2 hours telling us the experiences that they had had in this concert. So it was very special. We will be doing more of it. We need solidarity.
Yes.
And when we can do it with cultural power at the center, then we can invite so many others into that space of love and connection.
Yeah.
Meklit, as I listen to you speak, um, what stands out to me is something that I always talk about on this show when we discuss the power of music, and the fact that musicians, when you're in that moment, there is being in that moment of being on stage and playing together as a collective is a cracking open of your spirit to allow the source to come and move through you. That's what
That's right.
happens during praise and worship at church.
Mhm.
When music is involved and those emotions get high, there's a cracking open of your spirit, and it allows the source to come through. And I say that all the time, and that's what I'm hearing about that experience that J Ray was speaking of. But you also get to experience something that I feel is also life changing, and that's travel.
Yeah.
Travel
Mm-hmm.
changes you. Travel makes you a different
Yes.
person. And as an immigrant myself, I experienced that as a child. So what what are you hoping, or what is your plan to bring that experience to a larger audience, um, to allow everybody else to feel that shift? Because, like you said, right now, immigrants are under attack, black people are under attack, and they don't understand. And a lot of times we don't understand that we're all one and the same. And just because we may have been born someplace different, there are powers that be that are trying to eliminate large groups of people. So in your messaging and in your travels and all the work that you're doing, what is your game plan to use your powers to crack that collective experience?
Ooh, you just got right to the heart of 2024, didn't you?
That's what we do here on Q.
That's what I do. That's what we do.
I guess, first of all, there's so many, like, when it comes to cultural strategy, there's never, like, you can't actually come at it in just one way. So what I want to say is that there's a few different ways that I can answer that question, and I'll just run through them, and then you stop me if you have questions in between, because I could talk.
Love that.
Like, I could just keep going. Okay. From a personal place, I just want to speak for a moment about my music. I make music that's Ethiopian jazz. I stand on the shoulders of giants. I'm on a continuum. The music that I make is deeply influenced by Ethiopian pentatonic scales, melodies, and rhythms. African music, and jazz is also African music.
Yes.
And so for me, making Ethio-Jazz is a place where I have turned my experience of African diaspora solidarity into a sound practice that I speak about everywhere I go. There's an amazing story about the origin of Ethiopian jazz, which is that there's a man by the name of Mulat Wastatke, is the creator of Ethiopian jazz. And if you know, like, the Ethio Peaks, like all those first Ethio Peaks that folks would hear, that was him as the composer and vibraphonist and conga player. Now, Ethio-Jazz came about because Murat Wastatke was the first African to graduate from the Berklee College of Music, and he went to New York and he was playing congas with a bunch of Cuban congueros, and he saw, hey, they're bringing their traditional music into a relationship with jazz. And then there's a famous story of him playing with John Coltrane, and Coltrane took him aside and said, yo, you gotta bring your traditional music together with jazz, like, you bring it to the root.
Yes.
He ended up moving back to Ethiopia and created Ethio-Jazz from there. So there would be no Ethiopian jazz without not only the mentorship of African American giants of music, but also Cuban musicians. And we know that the histories of forced migration that birthed the music of the Americas runs deeply, deeply through every single time that I stand on a stage and sing. I sing solidarity. Like, that is so there's sometimes I like to say that we use music to talk about the things that are hard to talk about, the places where our tongues get stuck. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write songs that acknowledge history, that look history in the eye, and do not erase any peoples from any story. So that's number one. Number one. Number two, the project, Movement, is a podcast. It's a radio show. It's a live performance experience that is about the intersection of music and migration. Here's the way I think about it. We have a national strategy that is our podcast and radio show that's about narratives of migration based in the people who have experienced it. That means our stories coming from our lived experiences with nuance, with tenderness, with a focus on ancestral wisdom, continuum, epiphany, right as we can look pain, trauma, and difficulty in the eye and say that we get to make the meaning out of all of those experiences. Now, at the same time, understanding that we're in a place where oppression must be challenged every single day, but oppression cannot be challenged only on, or only in this way. Like, what I started to understand was that, like, I loved making the podcast and the radio show, but I needed it to live in my community too. I needed it to be in my everyday, where I walked down the street, and to be able to have an impact on my direct community. And the movement gathering strategy, the Immigrant Orchestra, our solidarity building strategy, really comes out of that. So, and it's also solidarity also for me means that we understand that in the age of climate crisis, like, things are probably about to get a lot more difficult before they get better. And we need each other. We need interconnection to be able to not just withstand, but to create new systems that are based from the ground up. And so, so the Immigrant Orchestra, our gathering strategy, building solidarity, not just within immigrant communities, but across oppressed communities, is a part of how we create new systems that will actually get us to the place we want to go, which is non-hierarchical, which is based in culture and cultural power, which is organized, which is being able to say what our communities need and pressure the people who are in power to support us in getting folks what they need every single day. I think I'll stop.
Wow. I have a question in here. I find it so innovative that you, as a multifaceted creative, also decided to insert podcasting into your work. How did that come about? Because seeing this is like, oh my goodness, this is like the perfect way to extend these conversations, these stories, right? That impact people so deeply. So how did that epiphany come?
It wasn't an epiphany. I wish it was. I wish I had a great epiphany story for you. But you know how sometimes things are just one foot in front of the other?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's like, what, anyway, I had a very dear friend called Julie Kane. She is now a senior editor at Throughline, which is a new show on NPR. And they do hour-long documentaries weekly, which are amazing. And Julie Julie invited me. She basically was like, hey, I want to make a podcast about world music. What do you think? And we started talking. At the time, I had a booking agency with my partner. It was like a very little boutique booking agency, and it was called 2042. Mm-hmm. And it was about, at that time, back in 2017, that was the year that the United States was no longer projected to have a cultural majority or an ethnic majority. Mm-hmm. I don't like the word majority minority, because we're not a minority, right? Actually, in the world, we are,
right?
Call a thing a thing,
right?
So we had, and I was telling her about 2042, and then we decided together, like, let's do a podcast about music and migration. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of started cooking it, and she brought in an amazing producer who has been my ride or die, Ian Koss, who's like just won a Peabody. He's genius. He's like the most trust-based, heartfelt person, multi-talented musician, editor, sound designer. Mm-hmm. And we started making stuff, and then it evolved into this today. And it took a long time. It took a long time to find our partners. We knocked on many doors. Many people were like, yes, 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 no, yes, 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 no, 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 no. Right. And so we had to find our own way,
Yeah. Wow. Really quickly, so in listening to movement, you hear the sound design, you hear your storytelling in there, as I love the way you just process the conversations that you're having with the folks that you're talking to. You're welcome. So my question to you is, how, if at all, is the making of these movement episodes kind of like songwriting?
Mhm.
It's very creative. It's a very creative process. It's very different from songwriting. Is I think of songwriting as a mix of discipline and mystery. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you ask a lot of songwriters and you say, well, where did the song come from? They're like, I don't really know. You know, and it's kind of like and it's about that cracking open that you talked about before. So songwriting for me is like catching melodies as they come, recording them, and then going into the studio and like working it. So the essay writing, the storytelling is a working, and it's very emotional. It's actually kind of difficult, because you have to process not in a like not in a like it's just like you have to find a little fractal place in your own life where some huge question gets distilled into like a very simple exchange. And so it's actually interesting. I haven't thought about it, but I have started collecting stories the way I collect melodies and then finding where I can insert them. So maybe this question has brought out for me how it's more similar than I realized. And then I do have to like work it, work. And it's different because it's prose. And then I have to speak it out loud. So I write it, I speak it, I edit it because it has to sound good spoken. So
Yes.
that's very different. But it's sort of similar when you write something and then you sing it and you realize, oh, okay, all the phrasing of this word, I need a word that's two syllables here. I can't use the word that's four. So it is a very creative process. What I'll say that's different, that's really fun for me, is that I've not ever quite done the essay-based creative writing that I have to do to make the stories come alive in the podcast. And that's a new muscle for me, and I'm really enjoying it. I do love it. Like I find that the final outcome is like this exact place between like just speaking a story and then like crafting, the crafting part of it. So I actually really enjoy it, even though it's a challenge. It's not like it takes me time. I don't It's not instantaneous at all. I'll work on an essay for like 2 weeks, stuff
Mm.
like things like that.
And so and listening to movement, and what resonates with me a lot is the fact that as an immigrant, like I said before, I came to this country at 2 years old, from Barbados. And growing up and being and matriculating through American culture and being a part of American culture, I and I don't know if you experience this, but there is becoming more and more, there's a voice that's getting louder amongst Black Americans, that feel like they're in, not competition, but there is this, I don't know, this weirdness that I'm feeling not even developing, but it's been there for a while. And you hear things because we're so stealth because I'm here. I've been here. But I'm stealth, and I hear the things. I hear the comments every now and then. I hear the little, you know, those foreigners this, those immigrants that, Caribbean people think they're better than everybody. Africans do this and that. You hear little stuff like that. And I'm wondering how you've dealt with it. Does movement help in that healing process? Because I think for me, I try not to
Mm.
get sidetracked by all those conversations, because I really do believe that that's just another distraction to keep us fragmented. And of course, when we're fragmented, the powers that be are going to keep winning. And so, but I'm just wondering for you, Meklit, like in doing movement and healing, does that bring about a healing for you as we deal with this amongst ourselves in this community as Black people from all parts of the diaspora, all parts of the world?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's a very honest question. I just want to thank you for your vulnerability also, because that's it's painful.
Yes.
It's painful. And for me, like definitely growing up, I had a lot of questions about where I belonged. And I think that, you know, I got called African booty scratcher growing up in New York. I also came to this
Oh,
country
what
when I
part of
was
New
two
York?
years old.
What part of
Oh,
New York?
Crown Heights.
Me too.
They
I grew up in
really?
Crown Heights. Yes, 760 Crown Street between Utica and Eastern Parkway.
We lived on Eastern Parkway. But we lived all over Brooklyn. We lived in
Yeah,
Bay
yeah.
Ridge, and then at the end we lived in Park Slope. We lived in all those places, the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So and definitely all of those things happened. And I think that, you know, here's my generous, so there are ways that I can look at these things with, like, I look at them from different levels. So one level, I don't mean to do this, it's kind of more like this. It's not a
That's
hierarchy, it's like
perfect.
different
Right.
different seeds, So one way that I look at it is that, you know, when we came to this country, there was a moment where my parents had to understand what race was. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a very alienating thing. If you're an African American person, hearing an African say, "What is race?" that sounds like a slap in the face.
Yeah.
So I can walk into, and the reason that I can walk into that conversation with empathy right from the start. But because I have lived both sides, right? Because my communities are both communities. And what I mean by that is that in Ethiopia, it's all about ethnicity. It's all about, like, are you Amhara? Are you, like, I'm actually also two ethnicity. My father is from a place called Kambata, which is in the south of Ethiopia. It's not a ethnic group that has a lot of political power. It's like relatively small. There's not a
Okay.
lot of language speakers. My mother is Amhara, which is one of the, larger tribes that has had historically a lot of political power. That
Mm.
itself was like an inter-ethnic marriage. That was a big deal back then. So they come to this country, and they have these identities that have a meaning for them given the context that they were in. And then everyone around them tells them that doesn't matter. What matters is that you're Black. And it's like, well, what does it mean to be Black? And you have to learn. And you also have to, so I try to have empathy for both sides, because also for my parents it's like a shock. They're like, wait, what?
Right.
So I think there's like a basic lack of communication, or like just understanding of context, that kind of leads to some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody saying, well, you don't think you're us. There was a lot of that. And for me, and I was like, well, what does somebody see walking down the street from me? And then you're living this in between. And that was like my whole teenage years.
Yeah.
Like my whole teenage years was trying to find peace with that. And I honestly did it through reading Black American literature, and talking to my community,
Yeah.
and that's how I like, and then reading like Audre Lorde and
Yes.
Bell Hooks, but then literally Toni Morrison and Ralph Ellison, and so because all of them are speaking these very complex stories and saying nobody gets to make anyone a monolith. And then I was saying, oh, okay, it's okay for me to not be a monolith. I can accept my complexity and my hybridity, and I might be a paragraph. I'm not a sentence, but I'm pretty much guessing that they aren't either. And somebody tries to make you just describe you as two words, a Black man. Yes, you are. And maybe sensitive and an introvert, and you know, like,
Yes.
and your roots are from North Carolina, and your roots might be from Congo, or you know, like, it's just we all have so much, and like nobody can simplify any of us. Solidarity building as a strategy and a practice is always about understanding that we have more in common than we do apart. And I think my healing. So, the one thing I wanted to say, there's the first episode that we did in the podcast, season 1, episode 1, is a brother called Odyssey. And I don't know if y'all know him.
Oh,
You know
MC,
Odyssey? Hmm.
producer, all the above. Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. Sudanese and African American.
Mhm.
And he tells this amazing story because he became the bridge between exactly what you were talking about, where he would go to his African American family and they would be talking about foreigners. And he would go to his Sudanese family and they would be talking about African American people. And he would be
Mhm.
like, no. He would say no, but what about? And he transformed his family as as a bridge, as a bridge. And so, like, I do think that there's so much that happens when love is involved, you know, when personal connection is involved. And that can be like between friends, that can be within a family, that can be within a community. But we do have so much more in common than we do different. And the oppressive forces that seek to destroy us, that seek to minimize us and strip us of our power, are the same exact ones. So who is winning? Who is winning
Exactly.
when those words get spoken? And so there is a deep healing that needs to happen. um and you know, I think that, you know, there's a strange thing that happens when we think things are our own struggles. We think it is up to me to solve this deep wound. But this is a systemic problem. This is a systemic problem that needs systemic solutions that are working at very large scale levels. I think we're further along than we ever have been, even as we still see those narratives popping up in people that we love, you know, in people that we love and cherish and adore. And we don't, you know, so we can be nodes of healing, and our healing can radiate outwards. And at the same time, like, these are systemic questions that have to be answered at a systems level.
Wow. Meklit, thank you so much for sharing your gift of storytelling, your gift of understanding and healing, with the Q Points audience. So, what are some things that you would like to share with our folks that people should be on the lookout for? That you want to prep the folks for? Any upcoming performances, that sort of thing.
Well, I do want to say that I released an album earlier this year called Ethio Blue, and it was my first album in several years. You know, pandemic. I have a 5-year-old,
Lot going
so
Who
on.
wants to be on the record, I'm sure.
need I say more? No, he is on the record.
Oh,
Oh, sweet.
He is. He is on the record. He's on the record. The very first song, Antidote, he was 4 months old when we recorded. We were doing some recording, and he was making such cute sounds. We were like, okay, come on in front of a mic. And he was like, it's like, there's like a little bit of that,
yes.
Mhm.
just the right way. And then I just got the masters of a new record that will come out next year on Smithsonian Folkways called A Piece of Infinity. And it's interpretations of several different traditional Ethiopian songs with some originals. There's a very special song in there called Stars in a Wide Field that is based on the children's riddles from my father's tribe, Kambata, that are translated. And they're like, it's a cosmology, it's a universe, it's like literally seeing into the way of being, the way people walk through the world, you know? So that's like a collaboration between, like, you know, millions of children and me. You know, because they're a mix of improvised riddles And like you know what, like in traditional poetry, people memorize like thousands and thousands of them, and then you got to bring them out at the right time, like that kind of thing.
Wow.
That's so exciting.
Thank
Well,
you.
Meklit, I and I know I can speak for Jerry on this. I am so happy that you took the time out to join us on this episode of Q Points and to share your perspective and take us on this journey with you. Like I said, we see each other. You know that. I'm so
Yes, I
glad we had
do.
that. I had that opportunity to share that experience, and I hope that other people, you know, can get a glance into that part of our lives. And we're so excited for what's coming up from you. But please let our audience know how they can find you also.
Yes. So you can find me on all the things, on all the socials at Meklit Music, Meklit music.com. That's my Instagram handle, TikTok, man, like all those things. And then listen, I live in San Francisco, and if you forget my name, you can literally Google Ethiopian singer San Francisco, and I come right up.
Boom. Boom. There it is.
I'm telling you, because like
It's
part of the
simple.
thing is I'm like, people forget how to find me. They're like, what was her name? That I liked her.
Where's
What was
she
that?
at
Ethiopian
again?
singer, San Francisco. Okay.
Dope. Dope. The one and only Meklit Hadero. Thank you once again for joining us on this episode of Q Points. As I always say, J Ray, in this life, you have an opportunity. You can either pick up a needle or you could let the record play. I'm DJ Sir Daniel.
My name is J Ray, and thank you so much, Meklit Hadero, for joining us as well, y'all.
Thank
And
you.
this has
Thank you.
been
Be well, everyone.
Thank you. And this has been Q Points Podcast, dropping the needle on Black music history. We'll see you on the next go round. Peace.
Peace, y'all.